What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create an economy bot in Discord without real coding. So this is going to be a new series on the channel, so there's going to be a bunch of parts to this video. This is only the first part, so I'm basically going to show you how to set up the database and everything, and I'm also going to create the balance command and also a beg command to earn money. So to get started, I'm going to show you guys a preview of what we're going to have. So I have this tutorial bot here, and I have two slash commands in the tutorial bot. So there's slash balance and slash beg. So if I do slash balance, then it's going to send an embed, and it's going to say my balance, and it's going to say my wallet balance and my bank balance. And I already have my wallet balance because I was using this earlier, but I don't have anything in my bank. And I can also do slash beg, and this is kind of similar to the dankmemr command if you use other Discord bots. This is a pretty popular command in other economy bots. So if you do slash beg, you have a chance of earning money. And I'm going to show you how to customize the probability so that you can customize the probability of the user earns money. And you can also customize these messages. So after running it a few times, I earned some money, and it says I gained 502 coins. And now if I do slash balance again, you can see it actually does add that wallet balance. And again, I'm going to show you how you can customize these messages and also customize the probability of getting money. So to do this, we're going to be using a website called Scratch for Discord. The link will be in the description if you're new to Scratch for Discord. If you've never used Scratch for Discord before, I highly recommend you to watch a couple of other videos on my channel before watching this one, and those will be linked in the description, just to have an understanding of the basics and to know what it's like to use Scratch for Discord. So since we're using slash commands, we're going to have to register slash commands. So if you go over to links and click register slash commands, I already have the commands registered because you just saw them in the server. And I also have a tutorial of how to use this GUI to create slash commands, so make sure to watch the slash command tutorial too if you haven't already. So in the beg command, it's just going to be a simple slash beg. There's no parameters or subcommands or anything. But in the balance, we're going to have one parameter, which is the user, because in most bots, you can either do just slash balance to get your own balance, or you can do slash balance with another user to get the other user's balance. So once you've created the slash commands, you can exit out of that and come back to the code. So I actually already have this code written, but I'm going to show you the code and explain it all to you. I think from now on in my tutorials, I'm going to do it like this instead of actually coding with you guys in the video. I'm just going to have the code already laid out, and I'm going to explain it step by step. So I feel like that'll be easier to understand, and it'll make the videos shorter too. So the first thing we want to do is we actually have to create a database, because we have to use the database for this. So if you scroll down in the toolbox and go to database, and we're going to be using the JSON database. You can also use MongoDB or any of these if you want, but those are a little more advanced, and JSON is probably the easiest one for most people. So we're going to be using the JSON one. So here's the block right here to create a new database. You can just drag this in, and you can name the database whatever you want. So this will be the name of the database. You have to remember this for later, because later when we want to access the database, we have to use this name to access values in the database. And the second text box is the name of the file. That doesn't really matter to us because we're not going to be using it anywhere else, but it's just going to show as the file name. There's going to be database.json or whatever you name it .json in your folder of your code. So make sure you have the connect to Discord bot token. So the first thing we have is when a message is received and when a slash command is received. These aren't really commands, but these are just to register the economy data with the user. So basically, whenever a user sends a message, it'll create an account for them in the database. So even if they're not trying to do anything with economy, if they just send any message in general, it's going to create an account for them in the database. So later, when they actually do commands, we don't have to worry about them not having accounts or anything. Because if we don't have this, then in commands, when we try to access their value from the database, it's going to send an error because they don't exist in the database. So we have to make sure to create their accounts in the database before they actually run the command. So when a message is received or when a command is received, then it'll run this function with the user who sent the message or the user who ran the command. And what the actual function does So it takes in this user value, so whatever you passed in here, and that value is saved as the user variable. So it checks if the user is a bot, because we don't want to create accounts for bots, because obviously bots won't be able to do commands or anything. So just to keep our database clean, we're gonna make sure the user is not a bot. So if the user is a bot, then it'll just stop script, and what this block does, it just stops the script right here, so it won't continue, so it won't go on to any of these. It'll just stop here and not do anything else. So then it checks if the user already has an entry, because these events are triggered no matter what. It doesn't matter what server or anything. So we have to check, and every message they send, we have to check if the author already has an entry in the database, and if it doesn't exist, then it needs to create one. So this ID, this is what's going to identify in the database. So you do have to remember these. I just named it wallet and then dash ID. So for each user in the database, it's going to be wallet dash the user ID, and then it's going to say how many coins they have in their wallet. And same thing for bank. So you have to check if that entry already exists in the database. You have to make the name whatever you set up here in the database name over here. So I named the database, so I'm going to put database in each of these blocks. So it's going to check if that user already has an entry, and if it doesn't, then it's going to set that exact same entry to 0, and make sure these two things are the same thing with the create text with, because we want to set this to 0 only if they don't have an entry in the database already. And then the next part is basically the same thing, but instead of wallet, it says bank, because there's going to be two different entries for each user. They're going to have a balance in their wallet, and they're also going to have a bank balance. So this is just the same thing. It checks if they already have a bank entry with their user ID in the database, and if they don't, then it creates one and sets it to 0. And this block, make sure you get this block from the math category. If you go to math and then drag in this over here, some people go to text and drag in this text block, and this technically also works, but the way we're doing it, we're going to be using these numbers. It just makes it easier, so we can check if the number is greater than or less than something. But if it's text, we can't really do that because it's a text value, and the computer doesn't know how to do that. So moving on to the next thing, we have the balance command. So it's going to check if the interaction name is equal to balance when a slash command is received. And again, if you don't understand what any of these slash command stuff means, feel free to go to the description and watch my slash command tutorial, and that will hopefully clear things up a bit. So when a slash command is received, if they're running the command slash balance, then it sets a variable. So you can go over to variables and create another variable and name it target, and the target variable will store whoever the target of the command is. So this part is a little more advanced. So this block you can get in the logic category, and it's right here. So you test if the option name of user equals null, and this blue block, what this returns is whatever user they pass in. So if they do slash balance and select a user, this is going to return whatever user they selected. And if they didn't select any user, it's going to return null. And in JavaScript, null basically means nothing. So what this is basically saying is if the selected user is equal to nothing, so which means if they didn't select anything. So if they didn't select any user, then the target is going to be interaction author. So that means they're going to be running the command on themselves to check their own balance. So if it's true, the target will be interaction author. And if it's false, that means they did select the user. So the target is going to be the user option, whatever user they selected. So next, it's going to check if that user is a bot again, just to make things easier. So if it is a bot, it's going to send an ephemeral message, and it's going to say bots cannot have balances. And I did the stop script block so it doesn't continue the rest of the script. And also, instead of the stop script block, you can always do it another way. Instead of the stop script block, you can make this a not, and if not a bot, and you can have everything below it inside that if statement. That's how most people do it, but I just prefer having it like this, and it stops the script just to keep it more simple, so you don't have a bunch of if statements inside each other. So if it's a bot, it's not going to continue, and if it's not a bot, it'll do the rest of the code. So it's going to check again if the user has a wallet entry in the database. So if they don't have an entry, then it does that function again. So it'll do this function and create an entry for them. and then it'll continue on with the rest of the command. There's a pretty low chance of this happening because we already register the data whenever a person sends or runs a command, but it's a good practice just to have this just in case, because if for some reason the data doesn't exist in the database, then it's going to have an error and then the command won't work. A possible scenario where this could happen is maybe if the bot just started and if I do the command on another account that didn't send any messages or ran any commands, then they wouldn't have their data to begin with over here. So then if I ran the command, if I selected another user in this command, and if that user didn't run any commands before, or if they never sent any message, it's a rare scenario, but it could possibly happen, then it'll send an error when you run this command because they don't have the data. So just in case, it'll check if they have an entry and it'll do the function if they don't. And the reason we only have wallet here instead of the wallet and bank is because you only need to check one, because if the wallet doesn't exist, that also means the bank doesn't exist, and vice versa. If the wallet does exist, then that means the bank also exists. So it doesn't matter if this is wallet or bank, it'll do the exact same thing because it'll just check if that exists in the database, and that'll be the same thing for the other one. So if either of them don't exist, it'll do this function and it'll set both of them to 0. So now that all of the checks are complete, we can move on to actually creating the embed and sending it. So if you don't know how to create embeds, it's pretty simple. You can go over to the embeds category over here and use this block at the top, and over here is going to be the name of the embed. You can name it whatever you want. I just named it bal embed, and this isn't going to be shown to the user. This is only in the code, so the user will not be able to see this. And then you can use a bunch of these blocks inside that to configure the embed. I didn't use all of the block, but I used quite a few. So I set the embed color to blue, and I set the author to user balance, and the profile picture of the author is going to be the profile picture of target. So from now on, we're just going to use the user as target because the target variable is already set to either interaction author or the selected user, depending on if they selected a user or not. So the member profile picture of target is going to be the profile picture of the author of the embed, and the description is going to say target's balance. So this will basically mention the user. If you don't want to mention them, you could also go to the members category and put username of member and then put the target in here. But I'm just going to mention them. And by the way, in embeds, when you mention people, it doesn't actually ping them. So even if you mention them inside the embed, it's not going to actually notify them or anything because it's inside an embed. And it's also going to set the embed thumbnail to the target's profile picture. And now for the main stuff, it's going to add 2 fields. So one of the fields is going to be the title wallet, and the description is going to be the value of their wallet from the database. So we have to use this ID again, whatever you called these entries. So I named them bank dash and wallet dash, and then whatever the ID of the user is. So it's gonna get the wallet of the target because it's saying the ID is member target, and from the database with this name, and that'll return whatever number is saved in the database. So by default it's gonna return 0 because by default we set it to 0 here, but if it's something else then it's gonna return another number. And field inline, this doesn't really matter as much. This just changes the look of the embed. If it's true, then both of the embeds will be next to each other, and if it's false, they'll be on top of each other. And the second field is basically the same thing. I just changed the words from wallet to bank. So it's going to get the bank info instead of the wallet info. And then finally, we have the interaction reply block, and it's going to send the embed with the name bal embed. And this is going to be whatever you named it up here. And I set ephemeral to false. So our final command for today is /beg. If you've used Dank Mirror before or any other popular economy bots, this is a pretty standard command that's in most economy bots. It's basically pretending that you're begging to people and you have a chance of getting money. And if you do get money, it's going to choose a random number of money to give. So we have 3 variables here. The first variable is called received, and this will basically determine if the user even received any money or not. So received will be false if they didn't receive any money, and it'll be a number, and if they did receive money, it'll be the number of coins they received. So we're using this test block again. We're gonna use the math, and then we're gonna use this random integer block. So it's gonna test if the random integer from 1 to 3 is equal to 2. So this is basically saying it has a 1 in 3 chance. So you can kind of think of it like it's generating a random number from 1 to 3. So the random number could either be 1, 2, or 3. Those are the 3 possibilities that the number could be. And we're checking if the number is 2. So there's a 1 in 3 chance. So if we set this to 2, for example, then it will be a 50% chance, because it can either be 1 or 2, and we're checking if it's 2. And if we have set this to 10, then it'll be a 10% chance, because it can be any number between 1 and 10, but it has to be 2. So I'm actually going to set this to 2 just to make it a 50% chance, and you can customize it however you want. You can make it more likely that they don't receive money or more likely that they do receive money. So this is basically saying a 50% chance. So the first option will be if it's true. So if the random integer from 1 to 2 does equal 2, then it'll choose a random integer from 500 to 1000, and this will be the amount of coins they receive. And if the random integer from here doesn't equal 2, so if it equals 1, then it'll return false. So overall, it's saying there's a 50% chance of this being false, and if it's false, that means they didn't receive any money. But if it's true, then it'll choose a random integer from 500 to 1000, and this will be the number of coins they have. So then this variable would be set to however many coins they get. And you can customize these, of course. If you don't want them to receive as much, you can maybe set this to 50 to 100. Then it'll choose a random number between 50 to 100 for the coins to give to the member, but I'm gonna keep it as 500 to 1000. And the next 2 variables, these are pretty simple. These are just a list of different messages. So the gain messages are a list. So if you go over to the lists, we used this create with list block, and in each of these spaces you can put a text box and type whatever you want. And if you want to add more options, you can click this blue settings icon and drag more items in from the side, and it'll add spaces here. And you can add as many as you want, it doesn't matter how much. So these are the gain messages. So if they receive money, these are the 3 possible messages that they could receive, that they could get. And if they fail, so if they didn't receive any money, then these are the 3 possible messages that could be shown to them. So then it's gonna check if they received money. So if not received, so if they didn't receive any money, so this will run if this is set to false. So if this is set to false, that means they didn't receive any money, so anything inside this if statement will run. But if they did receive money, it'll be a number, so this if statement will not run. So if they didn't receive any money, then it creates another embed called failed embed. It's gonna set the color to red, it's gonna set the title to no money received, and the thumbnail will be the member profile picture of interaction author. And keep in mind, over here we're not using the target variable anymore. We only use that in the balance command because the target could be different, because if they selected a user, then the target will be that user, but if they didn't select the user, then the target will be the interaction author. But in the beg command, the target is going to be the interaction author either way, because obviously you won't be able to select another member to beg for or anything like that. And then lastly, it's going to set the embed description to a random item from this fail messages variable. So if you go over to list and use this block, it says in list and then select the variable, and it's going to say get a number. But instead of a number, you're going to change this drop down to random, so that'll make it so it gets a random item from this list. So you can just add as many items as you want, and you don't have to change anything else. It'll always just choose a random item from this list, however many items you add. And lastly, it'll send an embed with the name of fail embed. And then we have an else statement. If you don't know how to add an else, then you can click this blue settings icon, and I just dragged in this else statement, and you can add as many of these as you want. You can add an else or an else if. but you can't add any more because I already have an else, and that's the end of the thing. So whatever's happening in here is if they didn't receive any money, because it says if not received, and then it has else, so whatever is in here will be run if they did receive money. So if they didn't receive money, it'll run this, and if they did receive money, it'll do whatever's inside this else. So if they did receive money, it's gonna add the received amount to the database of the wallet. So again, we're using this ID of whatever we used in the other entries. So you can go over to database, and the JSON database, we use this add block. So it's gonna add the received, and in this space, it's gonna be the number you want to add. And in this case, the number is going to be whatever the received variable is, because we chose a random integer, and it's going to add it to the wallet of the interaction author. Then it's going to set the embed with the name gain embed, set the color to green, set the title and thumbnail, and it also sets the embed description. The first part is the same. It also gets a random item, but this time it gets it from gain messages instead of fail messages. So it'll choose one of the messages from the gain messages. But after that, I also added a dash, and then it says gained received coins. So it'll say the message and then however many coins they received, and then it'll send that embed. And like I already showed you at the beginning of the video, that code makes all of this work. So hopefully you can look at this example now and you know how it works after looking at the code. So that's gonna be it for today's video, guys. I hope you learned something. And remember, as always, if you need any support or help, or if you have any questions, if you want to show off your code, or if you just want to be part of the community, make sure to join my Discord server, Millions World. The link will be down in the description. And if you're struggling with this tutorial or anything else related to coding, you can get support there. And also in my Discord server, I'm gonna start posting the files of code to my tutorials. So if you don't want to code this yourself, you can click the link in the description, and that'll take you to my Discord server, and go over to, and in the tutorial files channel, there's gonna be a file posted, and you can just go to Scratch for Discord and open a file and use that file to get all of this code, and then you can use that in your own bot. If this tutorial helped you, make sure to drop a like on the video and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.